Hello to all of you. This is the last video you'll receive from me for this course. So what I will do today, I will just talk a little bit about the main ideas, especially to bring everything together. So we talked about two notions, especially suffering and forgiveness, in historical context. In context in which a group of people was abused and persecuted by another group of people. And whenever we talk about such things, we are immediately inclined to take sides, to say that one of this group is better than the other, and especially better because it does not engage in the kind of persecution that the other group engages in. What we try to do in this course together, I would say, is to consider how it is possible to look at all the members of each of these groups as persons, as individuals, who may be at different times in various positions that allow them to inflict pain upon other people, and whether it is possible to redeem them as members of this humanity, to redeem them as members of a humanity in which we all belong, even if they are our own persecutors. And we looked at how various persons responded to persecutions within the context of the Holocaust and also within the context of communist persecution. And we saw that often the idea of forgiveness is rather considered in economical terms. And we call that transactional forgiveness because there is a transaction between the one who forgives and the one who is forgiven. And the transaction presupposes the idea that the one who is asking for forgiveness offers something to the one who's supposed to forgive so that the other person is able to or is encouraged to forgive. And due to this, there were certain actions that could not be forgiven. For example, murder. Nothing can be offered by the one who murders to the one who has been murdered, because the one who's been murdered cannot receive anything. And we also discussed the fact that, especially in Judaism, for example, murder is a sin that is not to be forgiven, because the one who forgives is the one who has suffered, and of course the one who's died cannot forgive anymore. But we also saw, and that was especially the case in some of the, for some of the people who were persecuted during communism, not for all, but we saw this especially in that context. We also saw that forgiveness can be understood outside of a transactional framework, and what we call in that what that forgiveness was called was, let's say, a non-transactional forgiveness, in which the one who forgives does not need to receive anything in order to forgive, but is moved towards forgiveness due to various features. One of them was that the one who's harmed forgives for his own or her own peacefulness. So if you harm me, I forgive you not for you, but for me. That means I don't need anything from you, but I need something to be changed in me so I can live in better ways in my life. That was not what happened in communist prisons. What happened in communist prisons was the acknowledgement that we are all made of the same stuff, and that, as Alexander Solzhenitsyn used to say, the line between good and evil crosses every human heart. And it's not between people, it's not between parties, it's not between countries, but rather is a line that crosses every human heart, and we during this life can go from one side to another without even realizing at times. As I want to remind you, I forgot her name, Martha Nussbaum. Martha Nussbaum was suggesting also, when she talked about the banality of evil, that it's not. those who inflict evil are not those who look like Darth Vader or Sauron, but rather are, or the orcs in Lord of the Rings, but are people like you and me. But in this case, what they for this final non-transactional forgiveness, what encouraged them to move towards forgiveness was rather the idea that I depend in this life on the other human beings. There were other aspects in connection with this, and that aspect had to do with post-traumatic, or obviously with post-traumatic events, but it had to do with intergenerational trauma. I could not find my words this evening. And that is that the trauma is passed through generation. In that case, it can somehow show our responsibility for what happens within us and for how we can redeem ourselves and become members, or full members of this humanity, by forgiving also the people who come before us and at the same time ourselves. Because the pain and suffering that has been experienced by our grandfathers and grandmothers and mothers and fathers has been passed somehow through us, in us. And we saw, when we talked about the Holocaust, we saw the generations of the granddaughters and grandsons of the Nazi officers who experienced that traumatic events in their lives because they knew they were coming from people who have inflicted the terrible suffering in the Holocaust. So, what are we to learn from all of this? I would say that, for me at least, maybe not for you, what I've learned from all these writings, and I am the same as you are, I learned from them too, is this idea that I cannot see myself as separated from them, and that the only possible answer to suffering is not to accuse it, is not to fight it, but rather to embrace it. And by embracing it, I transform the darkness and the hell in which the other person lives into heaven. And I talk about hell and heaven, but you don't have to take it in a religious sense, but rather the fact that if there is a hell on earth, there is solitude, the inability to be together with another human being. And those people who suffer, those people who inflict suffering are such people because they are not able to be with other human beings. As you may remember from our discussions, one of the people who suffered in prison said that the source of suffering is always fear. The source not of suffering, the source of violence. And you have to understand the one who attacks you, because if you don't understand him, then you lose the other one and you also lose yourself. And those people who survived the persecution in communist prisons realize that fighting against communism and fighting against persecution was in fact fighting against their own capacity to become persecutors of others. And just think about our lives nowadays. We are always accusing other group of individuals. I don't want to get political, but if we are on the right, we only see the bad things that happen on the left. If we are on the left, we only see the bad things that happen on the right, without ever thinking that those people who are on the other side of the aisle, or on the other side of the ideas, are also human beings like all of us, and that they try to make sense of the reality around them in their own way. It's all very easy to do so because the other do the same to you, So perhaps the only answer is to embrace. And what we probably realize in all this is that somehow we remain in each other's hearts, and we've been there somehow, and we recover ourselves in the beauty of this world, and that our persecutor is in our hearts too, and the people who love are in our hearts, and we are constituted in this way. And what I like you to do at the end of this class is to watch another video, not made by me, but a video of a song. I will put the link in the description of this video. Please watch it. It is a song from the end of the trilogy The Hobbit, and I think it says a lot about life, and it says a lot about this course too. We've been traveling with people who have suffered, and we go on, but they remain in our hearts. Thank you for this semester. I've been always afraid to teach this course online, but I've done it over the summer. Be well and have a good life.